Supreme Court has ruled in favor of a Colorado baker who refused to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple. Back in 2012, Dave Mullins and Charlie Craig were planning a celebration after they were married in Massachusetts. Masterpiece Cake Shop refused their business. That bakery is owned by Mr. Jack Phillips, a devout Christian who's been baking for decades. Now, Phillips lost several appeals before the Supreme Court agreed to take the case. CBS News Washington correspondent Paula Reid is joining us from the White House to talk about this and break it down for us. So, Paula, the court didn't make a decision on whether a business has the right to refuse a same-sex couple. Why is that?
That's right. Here, the court sort of dodged the larger question of whether or not a private business can refuse services to gay people, or in this case, a gay couple. In many ways, this case was considered the sequel to the Supreme Court's landmark ruling on gay marriage, that gay marriage is marriage. After that ruling, conservative groups, some religious freedom group, and other organizations, they decided to look for cases that would test just how far that ruling could go and whether or not they could carve out any kind of religious exceptions. And as you noted, in this case, the baker lost many of his appeals in the state of Colorado. So here, the Supreme Court, they haven't ruled on the bigger question, but what they did say is, look, I think that this baker was unfairly discriminated against based on his religion when he took this before the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. They believe that it's fine for a state to try to protect gay residents from any kind of discrimination, but they said in this specific case, they believe that it was actually the cake baker who didn't receive a fair hearing in front of this commission, because the people on it had what they described as an animus towards religion. They also point to the fact that the same commission that heard this baker's case also allowed a different baker to refuse to put an anti-gay message on a cake. So the word really coming out of the court here today is they're not going to rule on this larger issue of the extent to which private businesses can refuse to do business with gay individuals or gay couples, but they did kind of point the finger at this commission in Colorado, saying, look, you can try to protect gay residents, but you can't discriminate against people based on their religion.
Right. It does seem that they were taking umbrage and taking a point of with the Colorado anti-discrimination law, specifically the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. So at the end of the day, this didn't really turn out to be a First Amendment issue. It's or is it a religious freedom issue?
Well, they tried to craft this case as a First Amendment issue. They tried to argue that this man didn't have to have his expression, his personal expression through his art, through cake baking, dictated by the government, that he had the right to express himself or not express himself in any way he saw fit. They didn't make it as much about his religion. But when the case was decided, the justices sort of focused on his religion and the fact that they believed there was some sort of discrimination on the part of this commission towards this cake baker because he was trying to do things in line with his religious beliefs. So, you know, it's all nerdy in the weeds. I totally love it. But it is interesting because they were trying so hard to make this a First Amendment case, and then it comes down as sort of more of a religious freedom issue. But Vlad, this issue specifically is going to absolutely wind up back before the justices, and eventually they will likely have to decide the extent to which private businesses, particularly the more artistic professions in wedding planning, so that's flower design or cake makers, the extent to which they do have to participate in weddings that they believe violate their religious beliefs. Because as of right now, it is still an outstanding question.
Right, because in the decision, in writing for the majority, Justice Kennedy, I think it's interesting to point out here to our viewers, he did say that the question of religious beliefs must give way to anti-discrimination laws, and that might be it might be different in future cases, because in this particular incident, in this one individual's case, Mr. Phillips didn't get proper consideration because of his religious beliefs. Doesn't mean that another similar type case presenting itself before the court would be treated the same way.
That's right, because the case that was argued before the Supreme Court was about a same-sex couple that wanted to get married and have their cake made by the shop, and whether or not they were discriminated against, whether or not, you know, their rights were infringed, and whether or not the cake maker's rights were infringed. But the way they framed this decision, they sort of left the couple out of it and looked at the cake maker and what happened to him when he went before the Civil Rights Commission in Colorado. So it's interesting that this decision really reframes the argument and what we're looking at, kind of leaving that couple, the newlywed couple, to the side for the moment. But again, they're going to have to make a decision about this larger issue at some point. But after today, after this decision, that is still an outstanding question. It's just a warning to, similar commissions and similar organizations across the country in all the different states that are trying to protect gay residents, that they have to be careful too, not to try so hard to protect their gay residents that they actually discriminate against other people based on religious freedom or any other type of protected right.
That's a great point. And let me just ask you before I let you go, Paula, about what some of the liberal justices on the court during some of the arguments suggested and argued in the case of Mr. Phillips' lawyers and in the case of the Solicitor General, Noel Francisco. Elena Kagan was worried that perhaps this would lead to more anti-discrimination against same-sex couples, and that allowing this baker to avoid the anti-discrimination laws in the state of Colorado might lead, as you pointed out earlier, to photographers, jewelers, tailors, caterers, anybody else seeking to level those very same claims. And so there was a concern about that. And yet the lawyers for Mr. Phillips said that the court was exaggerating the number of times that these types of instances happen. But it does sort of suggest that this will not be the last time that a situation like this comes up before the court.
Absolutely not. And there is a pending case from a florist, a similar situation that is currently percolating down in the lower courts that the Supreme Court could opt to hear and take up this larger issue. But as you noted, there is a lot of concern from people who are concerned that by trying to protect some people's religious freedom, that is indeed pretext to discriminate against gay people or same-sex couples. But here you have the court sort of flipping that on its head and saying, no, look, this state went so far to try to protect its gay residents, they wound up discriminating against someone based on their religion. So still working itself out in the courts, this issue trying to balance the rights of now same-sex couples who can legally get married and private businesses. Still an unanswered, unresolved issue.
Paula Reid at the White House for us, breaking it down.